In schools, they're teaching an ideological version of American history, a version of American history that ignores our greatest triumphs and instead focuses on the most shameful parts of American history. It's a history that seeks to accentuate guilt. It's a history that makes people ashamed to be American rather than hopeful for a brighter future.
You're in San Francisco, you're running against Nancy Pelosi.
This is the ultimate underdog story. In California, Democrats are basically the default. There are a lot of Democrats in San Francisco, moderate Democrats, who are fed up with how life is. They are affected by homelessness, by all the problems that I just listed, these crimes, affordability, and they are sick and tired of it. I think that if there's ever a righteous crusade, this is it.
Our guest today is Bruce Lowe. Bruce is a native of the Bay Area and has made San Francisco his home for the last 6 years. To say Bruce is a history buff is a major understatement. He has won 5 national championships in History B and History Bowl, the difference between the two being individual versus team competition. He's also a champion in Jeopardy in 2020, which was the last year that Alex Trebek hosted the show. Bruce is very involved with the community in San Francisco, and he's determined to bring values and prosperity back to this once great American city. Bruce also has higher aspirations, his biggest challenge yet, which we'll talk to him about later. This is Bay Area Innovators, and I am your host, Steve Espas. Bruce, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, Bruce, you're a very competitive person. You've won national championships, and I think Gen Z is an incredibly smart and capable generation. And I always wonder what it would be like if Gen Z would focus more on learning and studying rather than, playing games or social media, right? And please tell us, how did you get to be at the level where you got to in history and all these other things that you won championships?
Well, I think that if you have a natural curiosity, that sort of learning happens naturally. If you're curious about a certain subject, you'll want to learn as much about it as you possibly can, which is what I did as a child. When other kids were perhaps playing in the streets, I was in the library. I was trying to consume as many books as possible, not because I wanted to learn and to get better at this competition, but because that was where my inherent curiosity was.
So I know you have much higher goals, and we'll talk about your biggest challenge to come yet later in the program. But please tell us, what is it that you find most interesting in history? Some of the interesting topics that you discovered that fascinated you to make your study.
So first of all, I think that history is collective human memory. It is a mirror that shows us not only what happened in the past, but what the future may hold. I think it holds a lot of mysteries and secrets, and it's also a story that we can interpret in many different ways. I would say that the parts of history that most fascinate me would be American history, because it is the history of our country and how we got to where we are as a nation and as a people. I'm also very interested in Chinese history because I am of Chinese heritage, and that's learning about the story of my ancestors and my bloodline. And last but not least, I'm very interested in Roman history because we derive a lot of our traditions and governance from Roman traditions, and a lot of what happened in Rome we see paralleled today in America.
Well, I grew up in Romania, and I've seen history rewritten many times, but specifically the communists in Romania rewrote history. Through your studies, do you see parts of American history being rewritten, and how do you know that's the case?
It's actually being rewritten right now as we speak. In schools, they're teaching an ideological version of American history, a version of American history that ignores our greatest triumphs and instead focuses on the most shameful parts of American history. It's a history that seeks to accentuate guilt. It's a history that makes people ashamed to be American rather than hopeful for a new, brighter future.
Why do you think that is?
I think that they want to push a narrative. I think they want to push an agenda, and the only way to push this agenda is by teaching the history the way that they're teaching it right now.
And the goal of this narrative is it to destroy the country?
Yes, in a way. To destroy the fabric of this country, to destroy the values that made it great and remold it into the values that they want it to be, which is to exploit this country and to turn it into a more authoritarian state, to destroy the freedoms that have made this country what it is today.
What would you say are some of the most defining and fascinating points in American history that you learned about and made you wanted to study more, made you more curious to learn more about?
Well, of course, we have to look at the founding of the United States. The United States was a country founded upon rebellion against unjust rule. Britain at that time administered America as a colony, as an extractive sort of territory, rather than incorporating America into the central metropole of Britain and incorporating it into, say, mainstream British society. So America was founded upon the belief that we are people with dignity and we deserve to be treated thus. America really came from a place of rebellion. America came from a very pioneering, indomitable spirit, and we carry that spirit all the way to where we are today. Americans, I feel, won't stand for tyranny, won't stand for authoritarianism. We have seen this many times in history, that even though the American government has tried to impose restrictions upon its people, we have pushed back, and we have often won against the forces of authoritarianism, tyranny, and more control. I think another defining moment of United States history would be the Civil War. Nowadays, we talk so much about division within the country, about how we are heading towards a new civil war. The thing is that we have actually experienced that before. We have actually had a civil war in the past. And we can take some of the lessons from how we got to that civil war, how we fought that war, and how we mended the country to serve as a blueprint for what we can do to avoid such a fate again.
Take us back through some of the presidents. Which one would you say are your, the most defining, the most important presidents that shaped the country? I would assume George Washington is probably, the main one, but which other ones stand up, for you?
So I could mention many different presidents that have served as either as models for me or as inspirations. Of course, we have Abraham Lincoln. You have people like John F. Kennedy, but I will mention a president that I think embodies the American spirit, and that was Theodore Roosevelt. So Theodore Roosevelt, when he first became president, he was only 42 years old. He was the youngest president to ever take the presidency. And Theodore Roosevelt actually overcame a lot in his life. He was a very sickly child. Many people thought that he would never amount to be anything when he grew up, but he overcame those challenges. And not only did he overcome those challenges, he decided to be the embodiment of American ruggedness, of American freedoms. And to that, he, I believe, was the quintessential president of the turn of the century in America. An America where hope was boundless and America was increasing its prestige on the world stage. He attacked the corrupt forces in American society without fear. He was able to push through many reforms with a vigor that we don't see today in American society. And as the young president that he was, he certainly brought a lot of that youthful hope and zeal to the American presidency and really inspired many people to follow in his footsteps.
Please remind us the years when he was president.
Yes, so he was president from 1901 to 1909, I believe.
Yeah, awesome. Anything else in history that stands up for you, that you feel it's important to define you as a person in your quest for life and for office and for everything you're doing?
I often think back to the young leaders of history, especially as I go through this challenge right now. I'm often reminded that Joan of Arc was only 16 years old when she retook Orleans from the English during the 100 Years' War. I'm often reminded that Augustus Caesar was a mere child when he inherited Caesar's massive legacy and was able to solidify that legacy into a period of unprecedented peace in the Roman world, all before he was 30 years old. So it is really the young leaders of history who have taken up the challenge and brought peace and prosperity to the people that have inspired me and really interest me as of this present moment.
You were also on Jeopardy. Please tell us about that experience. It's something that I used to watch, 20, 30 years ago, and it's a show that a lot of people are familiar with. Tell us how you got there and what it was like.
So it's interesting. A lot of people think that they only take the smartest and most knowledgeable contestants. And that's not entirely true. So how you get on the show is that you actually take a test first. And this test is not necessarily the most difficult test in the world, but it does select for people who have the requisite knowledge to be on that show. But after that comes the hard part. So they invited me down to LA for an audition. And it is a TV show after all. They cast you for the show. So you have to go up and you play a sample round, and they want to see that you have that TV personality. They want to see interesting people with stories to tell on screen. And I think that they selected me because I had a few interesting anecdotes to tell them.
Anything that you remember to share with us?
Well, the anecdote that I did tell them was the fact that I had gone mountain biking the week before and I had suffered a very nasty fall. I actually went to the Jeopardy audition all bandaged up. And of course, they were asking me, like, Bruce, why are you all bandaged up like that? So I gave them that story, and they thought that it was interesting enough for me to be on that show.
Next, we want to talk about the next challenge, the next chapter in your life. And you decided to get involved into politics and run for office. And you happened to run against a pretty formidable contestant. Tell us, first of all, why did you decide to get involved in politics?
So I have always been interested in and been passionate about bettering my community. Before politics, my involvement in community service has always been as an activist. So, for example, in 2014, when the California State Senate passed SCA 5, which would have reversed Proposition 209, which would, in essence, re-allow for racial discrimination to occur in college admissions, that was a huge catalyst for me and the Chinese community to get involved in politics. For the first time ever, this community was mobilized in order to affect change politically. So I knocked on doors, I signed petitions, I participated in rallies, and I did everything that I could as a 17-year-old to try to put pressure on the California legislature to overturn this law. And the Chinese community also banded together. And we actually defeated that law. This bill was killed in the assembly, and it showed me for the first time what the power of a united people could do, even if that people was not involved in politics and had not affected change before. So in addition to SCA 5 and Proposition 16 in 2020, which was another attempt to introduce racial discrimination in college admissions, in 2021, there was a huge epidemic of violent hate crimes against Asian elders, especially in San Francisco, where elders were being attacked on a nearly daily basis. And I didn't want to do nothing, and I didn't want to sit by and just allow this to happen. A lot of people did symbolic gestures. They posted on social media, they wrote letters to their lawmakers, but I was interested in action, and I was interested in solutions. So what I did was I did organize a mass distribution of pepper spray in San Francisco's Chinatown. Now, why pepper spray? Because I felt that pepper spray was an effective, immediate solution to preventing these crimes, because it's a non-lethal deterrent that is very easily accessible and very easily distributed. So what we did was we gathered in Portsmouth Square, a major public square in Chinatown, and we distributed these pepper sprays to elderly members of the community, educated them on how to use it and other self-defense techniques. And I'd like to think that we prevented a lot of attacks because of what we did. So I think that sums up a lot of who I am. I'm a man of action. I'm somebody who will not sit by idly, and watch as members of our community are harmed, I am somebody that will step in and do something about it.
Well, yeah, I can see how your face change became more serious on this topic, which is very important. It has not been reported as much in the media as it should be. And indeed, a lot of elderly Asian, they may not even speak English very well. They may not be familiar with their laws. They don't even know, oh, maybe I call the police, that's not going to help, or it's not going to do anything. So it seems like a very important thing. Anything else you'd like to add? Is anything else happening now to address this issue?
So this issue is actually ongoing. This issue is far from over. And even though the media may sweep it under the rug, these incidents happen very often, especially here in the Bay Area. So we're actually doing it again. In 2 weeks, on June 15th, we're actually doing this exact same event again in the same place, and we are going to continue to help serve the community, because even as a congressional candidate, there are still immediate effective things that we can do in order to help serve the community, and I believe that what we did 3 years ago is still very much relevant today.
Now, next I'm going to ask you about your run. So you're in San Francisco, you're running against Nancy Pelosi. Now, you're running against someone who's the first female Speaker of the House. She was actually Speaker twice. She's been in Congress for 37 years. You're running against a formidable opponent. Tell us about, first of all, how do you feel, as a competitive person, how do you feel about this run?
I love it. I love being where I am right now. Everybody roots for an underdog, and this is the ultimate underdog story. This is the most clear example of David versus Goliath, perhaps ever in American history, and I'm all for it. I'm all for this because Nancy Pelosi has so much influence over American politics. I think that if there's ever a righteous crusade, this is it.
Yeah, we're talking about someone who's 84 years old versus a 27 years old, and you've been on the streets a lot, experiencing what happens. Any thoughts about what will it take for you to win this campaign, or to make a difference, to make it so that it's a competitive campaign?
Right. So, even though on paper the numbers are not in our favor, I do see a path to win here. Now, San Francisco is 60% Democrat, 6% Republican, and the rest are no party preference, which means they can swing either way. Now, I'm just going to assume, for simplicity's sake, that I'm going to take all the Republican votes. The next step would be to take all the non-party preference votes. In California, Democrats are basically the default. So if you're no party preference, there's a reason why they're no party preference. And I believe that a lot of people are no party preference because they're ashamed to call themselves Republicans in San Francisco. After all, it is something that could earn you social ostracism if you declare it publicly. And a lot of people who declare as no party preference care about these basic quality of life issues like law and order, education, inflation, homelessness, drug use, things like that erode everyday life in San Francisco. So if we can appeal to common sense, I think that we can win them over. Last but not least, we've got to peel away at least 10% of those Democrats from Nancy Pelosi. And there are a lot of Democrats in San Francisco, moderate Democrats, who are fed up with how life is. They are affected by homelessness, by all the problems that I just listed, much more so because there's nothing to protect them, there's nothing to insulate them. They don't have the wealth, they don't have the family connections in order to protect them from these crimes, the affordability, and they are sick and tired of it. And in the last election, I know for a fact that there were many moderate Democrats who voted for me. I've received a lot of support from moderate Democrats who just want to change, who want somebody who speaks for them. And I believe that if we can peel off a modest 10% of them, well, I have a majority right there.
Please share with us, to educate our audience, the difference in roles between what the mayor plays versus the representative, the Congress. Obviously, it's more related to the federal government, but as far as the city policies and the city well-being, how does this balance work?
So, you're right. The mayor deals with more day-to-day administrative tasks within the city itself, while the representative is more focused on national issues and votes on national issues. Now, with that being said, the representative actually has a big role to play in how the city and the district is run. London Breed, the current mayor of San Francisco, works very closely with Nancy Pelosi in order to secure funding, to allocate the funds, and Nancy Pelosi basically gives London Breed carte blanche to do whatever she wants. If she so wanted to, Nancy Pelosi could solve many of the problems in San Francisco by either putting strings on the money or allocating the money a certain way, or by using her influence to make sure that London Breed solves many of these problems in the district, but she's completely unwilling to.
Well, if you win, it'd be a historical event, I think. That's probably the biggest historical political surprise would be ever. What would you do, like the top priority for you if you were to be in office?
Right. So there are so many different issues that I want to tackle, but I think there's one issue that is hanging above them all, and that is the congressional conflict of interest. So how can we trust our representatives to make sound decisions for the benefit of the people if they're faced with this conflict of interest, this financial conflict of interest? And of course, I'm referring to insider trading. So the first thing that I would do is to close this loophole and make sure that the representatives are actually working in the best interest of their people rather than for the interest of their pocketbooks.
So what would be the steps to make that happen? How would you stop a congressional representative have insider trading information?
Well, it's a little bit of a catch-22, right? Congress would have to pass a law that would close congressional insider trading. Now, since Congress benefits from that directly, I find it to be very difficult to convince people to vote against their own interest. But what do congressmen, what do representatives care about? They care about getting reelected. If we can start a movement to get people to hold their elected officials accountable and to threaten them with the possibility of not getting reelected if this loophole is not closed, then I think that we have a chance of actually getting this passed.
How do they get this information? How do Congress people get the insider trading information?
They are the ones voting on the laws itself. So they are actually the ones making the rules for how these companies are regulated. For example, if a representative knew that a big law was coming up that would, say, greatly restrict the ability of the automobile industry in order to make profits, they would sell automobile stocks. If they knew that they were passing a big stimulus package for, say, the financial sector, then they would buy financial stocks and therefore not only benefit from insider information, but benefit from the actions that they're taking.
So since they're already involved with the legislation, probably the only way would be to not allow them to trade or not trade on those specific topics that they're doing legislation about, right?
What I would propose would be that representatives and elected officials whose decisions affect the financial markets would not be allowed to trade individual stocks. They would be allowed to trade what are called ETFs, which track the market as a whole, or they could hand over their portfolio to a blind trust where they are not in direct control of their investments. But in any case, we have to divest representatives of that conflict of interest to make sure that they're making the best possible decision for the people that they represent.
What would be your advice to young people, even younger than yourself, students, to approach education, to reach the level that you have and to do well, without being distracted by so many things that happen these days?
Read more. And to elaborate on that point, the educational system is only one voice. It is only one voice, but we have such a wealth of knowledge that we have accumulated throughout human history that we can determine what is right and wrong without somebody telling us what is right and wrong. If there's only one single source of truth, which is the educational system, then students will not be exposed to other perspectives. I encourage them to try to read as much as possible, to find out as much as they can, and use their deductive reasoning and to use their BS detector to figure out what the truth actually is. So really, ideological education only works when the students aren't curious enough to go sleuthing on their own. I think it's not even that hard to go sleuthing. We have the internet at our fingertips. We don't have to go into long lost archives in order to find the truth. A lot of the truth is right there in front of us, but students need to take that extra step of delving one step deeper, of questioning what is being taught to them. I think a lot of students just take whatever is taught to them for granted and they accept it as the truth, and that goes the same for the media as well. Whatever they see on the front page of CNN, they take that as gospel. And I encourage people to go one step deeper, as you guys at the Epoch Times have done.
And how important do you think your knowledge of history is in running your campaign? And again, keeping the tradition and the values of the United States?
Incredibly important. In fact, it is the bedrock for which I base my perspective upon. As I said, it kind of allows me to sift through the BS. Our media these days is incredibly biased. Our media feeds us a very specific image that they want to paint, and they're doing it for a specific reason. They have an agenda. But if you're able to kind of see through that, to use your knowledge in order to figure out what their motives are and what they're trying to do and what is the truth in reality, then that gives me a very powerful tool in order to escape the media censorship and the one single narrative that they're pushing out. I also think that it's very valuable because I get to see what's happened in the past and what has worked and what has not worked. History, after all, is collective human memory, and I feel like I am augmented by what has happened in the past in order to serve as a guide for me. So even though I'm very young and my life experience might not be as rich or as long as some other people that have been in Congress, I am aided by thousands of years of other people, of hundreds of past generations who are humans just like you and me, who have faced very similar situations.
And as far as reading, tell us more, how do you determine, what is the starting point? If young people want to read, how do they differentiate between the things that have been changed and, of course they can read a lot, but how do you find the truth basically on topics?
I would say keep reading and compare these different narratives to each other. I think that the human brain is incredibly, incredibly powerful when it comes to determining what the truth is. I think that it's very difficult to concoct a lie. When you start reading many things, you will inevitably notice discrepancies, which is why it's so hard for people to keep a big complex lie under wraps, because something will not seem right. So I would suggest young people to keep reading, to keep comparing the narratives, and to construct what the truth is from everything that they have gotten so far. And once I feel like they've read enough, then there are enough pieces to see what the general image is.
I think that's a very good point. Bruce, anything else you'd like to add? Any concluding thoughts for our audience?
Well, for young people, what I would say, aside from read more, is to act. Because change is not only ideas. Ideas are only the start. It is only the seed. But actions are what matter, and actions are what changes the world. There have been so many people with wonderful ideas, but they have never changed the world because they were too scared to act. So what I would say for young people is to find out as much about the world as they can, to learn. And once they have learned, to act and make the world a better place.
Bruce, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck in your campaign, and best luck with everything.
Thanks so much, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for watching another episode of the Bay Area Innovators. If you have a suggestion for someone to be on our show in the future, please send us an email at sfbay@epochtimes.com. We would love to hear from you. Thank you.